Good morning. It's not Monday. No, we had the extended weekend. We've got Tuesday, and yet we continue to be in this incredible volatility. And when I say that, Friday is a great example of exactly that. The day started off, we were sort of flat on the opening in terms of the Dow. We added 100 points. We dropped 300 points by midday. In the final, call it hour of the day, we lost over 350 points to finish down on the day 230. Not the worst thing in the world, but certainly incredibly volatile. Same story essentially goes with the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ was up and down. It's all around. Actually, towards the very end of the day, dropped about 120 points, finished the day down 170 points for the NASDAQ as well. So both indices getting smacked to the downside. Of course, the S&P getting hit as well. You take a look over at crude, which had been up towards that 93 level, pulling back. It was kind of in a wide range, quite frankly. Finished the day, call it around 91.60. And then you look at the 10-year, and the 10-year's been bouncing around. We were up towards 2, holding on to 2 for a little while, slipped back down, finished the day down about 1.92 for the 10-year. So the wild ride continues in just about every aspect of the markets that we are looking at. You look at the volatility index, that kind of says it all. We had a range on Friday from 26.5 all the way up towards 30. We got up towards 29.60, finishing the day about 27.75. That's going in not just to the weekend, but the extended day of the weekend with President's Day. So that's a pretty high level to be up there towards that 30 mark going into that extended weekend. Volumes were absolutely extraordinary. 48.5 million contracts trading in the options world on Friday going into that long weekend, the extension, and obviously a lot of focus going right towards Ukraine. What's going on with Ukraine and Russia? That's a huge story. The Fed, another monstrous story. We've got all kinds of predictions on how many rate hikes that we're going to be seeing this year. And we've got all that as a backdrop. Then you look up north, up towards Canada. I mean, everywhere you want to look, you're going to find some reason for a little bit of that volatility to be in the markets as they are, certainly right now. So we started off the day and then finished the day a little bit different than we started. But you take a look over, for instance, technology, that was down about 1%. Industrials, down about 1%. Semiconductors, down about 1%. Energy, down about 0.8%, pulling back just a little bit on the energy side of things. Started off a little bit better, but then started to push into negative territory as well. When we look for strength, certainly earnings has been something that has provided that for us many, many times. And I'm looking at other names within that area that actually were fighting against these markets. You've got Dollar Tree, you've got Clorox, you've got Ford, all moving to the upside, 5%, 3%. Nice moves, strong moves to the upside. A little bit of that defensive type names that were actually kind of buoying at least parts of the market. Allstate having a really nice day. Cisco has just been quietly since earnings going a little bit higher and a little bit higher. Netflix up about 1%. So it was not all bad, but the barometer that I've been using, and you guys hear me talk about it all the time, Tesla down about 2.25%. And that has literally been a great leadership to the mega cap tech. And that, of course, as they follow along, it seems like we are seeing obviously the NASDAQ itself, technology, all getting pulled to the downside. We did have a lot of weakness in so many different areas going back to Friday. You had GE, you had Intel, Penn, all those, the Penn Gaming. Then you look at some of those Chinese names, PDD, JD, Baidu, getting pulled to the downside. You also had Datadog, and then you had DocuSign, and then Boeing down 2%, and then Salesforce down about 1.5%. You get the idea. A lot more just kind of pulling on things to the downside in so many different industries or sectors, however you want to frame it. So over the weekend, all we'd heard about for the most part was what was going on up in Canada, and of course Ukraine, and what's going on. Is Russia moving? Are they pulling back? What's the story? We kept hearing story after story going throughout that weekend. That pressured the markets. The markets were absolutely getting crushed over the weekend. But as we get a little bit closer, you get through Monday, you get into Tuesday, the next thing you know, you see a lot different marketplace. As a matter of fact, Dow started the day down about 120. NASDAQ started the day down about 100 points. Now, the Dow continued to slip. It was down over 300 points at one point very early in the session. But we've been steadily moving back. Now, it's only an hour deep into the day. We've not only started down 100, then we were down 300, but we're pushing closer and closer now, about 100 points to the downside right now for the Dow, or maybe even a little bit better than that. Then you look at the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ not only was down 100 points, it didn't slip much off of that. All of a sudden, it started to move. We were up down about 30 points. Next thing you know, we're positive territory. We got into green and then up about 30 points for the NASDAQ. A huge turn in technology, a massive turn in the semiconductors. As a matter of fact, semiconductors early on were down about 0.75%. Last I looked, they were up about 1%. I look over at technology, down about a full percent, up about 0.3% or so. So big flips in this first hour. Then you look over at crude. It was near 94, closer now to about 93, a little bit more than that maybe. 10-year just a bit off of where it was on Friday, but 194, not 195, sort of in that sort of area. And you look over at the volatility index. Yes, makes some sense where we're hanging right now. 2880 all the way up a little bit north of 30 and actually hanging just below 30 right now. So interesting to see how things are playing out in this first hour. We know what a long day it is. I say that each and every day in 2022. It's because it's true. We all know it. And what I mentioned about what Friday looked like is a great example of everything that's been going on within the markets in this first 6-8 weeks of the year. Just unbelievable. So what are some of the winners today? What are really moving things? Well, the beta energy names really started off very, very strong. I look over at Marathon, I look at EOG, I look at Diamondback, I look at Oxy, I look at Devon, all those names. And it's funny, I listen to the TV, now everybody seems to love beta energy, right? I actually heard some focus on there today talking about beta energy, talking about how with these higher beta names, you are getting significant moves to the upside. Clearly, we have been. And it's not just a today's story or a week story, the Ukraine story, or this has been going on, as you all know, at least 16, 18 months. We have been watching this play out, and we've seen the option activity that has been flowing into so many names within energy. Big names as well, Chevron and Exxon, the XLE, all the different ETFs, and you take a look over at something like the XOP, for instance, which houses a lot of those beta names, all having a pretty nice rise to the upside. So that's been something that's been playing out. Datadog, 2.5% to the upside early on. AMD getting a nice little bit of activity today and up a couple of percent. I look at Salesforce flipping it around and holding up about 1.5% or so, but not everything is great. Home Depot, earnings sounded fantastic, as a matter of fact. They beat on the top, they beat on the bottom, they had strong net sales. But the reaction after being up a little bit was to sell it off, down 5.5%, something like that. I will be looking at that very, very closely today, as a matter of fact. Ford down about 3%. I look at the casinos. I look at cruise ships getting hit early on. Tesla early on, when those markets were down the way they were for the NASDAQ, Tesla leading the charge, down about 3% early on. GM down about 2.5%. You get the idea. Some of those Chinese names under some serious pressure today early on as well. NetEase and Baidu and JD and those kinds of names. And then throw in a big name within the Dow, like a Boeing, down about 2% early on. That is what we are seeing, at least in that first hour. Now, a lot's going to change. We all know that. And here we go with a few unusuals. I actually just got a call. I will be on the halftime report. Call it around 12:45 today Eastern time for some unusual, because we've got some really great unusuals hitting. It started slow, and now it's starting to accelerate. As a matter of fact, I'll give you the very first one. One of the first that hit. Freeport-McMoRan, trading right around 43.40. We had a buyer of 5,000 of the May 47 calls. They went for about $2.60. Now, this has been a name that I've been talking about for a very long time, because the emphasis for copper, which also the absolute demand, not just housing, not just different parts of industrial, but for the EV play as well. That's why I've been so aggressively active and interested. And anytime I see FCX, Freeport Mac hitting, I tend to be a part of that trade very, very rapidly. AMD is my next one. We talk about chips. We talked about the semiconductors, that big flip early on, right? AMD, a monster trade in this one, trading about 116.65. They're buying the February 25th, that'll be Friday, 120 calls. Only 38,000 of those calls being bought. So very aggressively getting bought on those as well. So we're seeing some great unusual option activity, and it's not just that name in the semiconductor space. We're seeing other names hitting as well, but just so much activity. It started slow, as I said, then we just started to accelerate, and we're seeing more and more and more and more. Folks, I hope you have a great day of trading. keep discipline. We always talk about that. That's very important. Understand the derivatives markets. You heard me talk about these volumes that we're seeing. It's been an incredible trade. It gives you that leverage, and you have that ability to control your risk if you understand what you're doing. But you've got to understand it inside and out. So hopefully you do. I will tell you this. I look forward to seeing you in the halftime report. We're going to have two new unusuals, and I got some ideas on why we're seeing in one particular area, one sector, it's been hitting more and more and more and more, and it's something we don't talk about nearly as much. We haven't been talking about it as much. It's going to be pretty interesting when we get to that as well. Have a great day of trading.